I think undoubtedly the way our society is shaped, murder is murder. Murder is murder in every way, and our society looks at murder down on it in the same light, and I don't think it's any different in any case.
Good. Let me ask you a question. There were 3 lives at stake versus 1.
Okay.
The cabin boy, he had no family, he had no dependents. These other 3 had families back home in England. They had dependents. They had wives and children. Think back to Bentham. Bentham says we have to consider the welfare, the utility, the happiness of everybody. We have to add it all up. So it's not just numbers 3 against 1. It's also all of those people at home. In fact, the London newspaper at the time and popular opinion sympathized with them, Dudley and Stephens. And the paper said if they weren't motivated by affection and concern for their loved ones at home and their dependents, surely they wouldn't have done this.
Yeah, and how is that any different from people on the corner trying to have the same desire to feed their family? I don't think it's any different. I think in any case, if I'm murdering you to advance my status, that's murder, and I think that we should look at that all in the same light instead of criminalizing certain activities and making certain things seem more violent and savage, when in the same case, it's all the same. It's all the same act and mentality that goes into murder, necessity to feed your family. So
suppose it weren't 3, suppose it were 30, 300. 1 life to save 300. Or in wartime, 3,000. Okay. Suppose the stakes are even bigger.
Suppose the stakes are even bigger. I think it's still the same deal.
Do you think Bentham is wrong to say the right thing to do is to add up the collective happiness? You think he's wrong about that?
I don't think he's wrong, but I think murder is murder in any case.
Yeah, well, then Bentham has to be wrong. If you're right, he's wrong.
Okay, then he's wrong.
All right.
Right.
Thank you. Well done. All right, let's step back from this discussion and notice how many objections have we heard to what they did. We heard some defenses of what they did. The defenses had to do with necessity, their dire circumstance, and, implicitly at least, the idea that numbers matter. And not only numbers matter, but the wider effects matter. Their families back home, their dependents. Parker was an orphan. No one would miss him. So if you add up, if you try to calculate the balance of happiness and suffering, you might have a case for saying what they did was the right thing. And then we heard at least 3 different types of objections. We heard an objection that said, what they did was categorically wrong, Mike here at the end, categorically wrong. Murder is murder, it's always wrong, even if it increases the overall happiness of society. A categorical objection. But we still need to investigate why murder is categorically wrong. Is it because even cabin boys have certain fundamental rights? And if that's the reason, where do those rights come from, if not from some idea of the larger welfare or utility or happiness? Question number 1. Others said a lottery would make a difference, a fair procedure, Matt said. And some people were swayed by that. That's not a categorical objection exactly. It's saying everybody has to be counted as an equal, even though at the end of the day, one can be sacrificed for the general welfare. That leaves us with another question to investigate. Why does agreement to a certain procedure, even a fair procedure, justify whatever result flows from the operation of that procedure? Question number 2. And question number 3, the basic idea of consent. Kathleen got us onto this. If the cabin boy had agreed himself, and not under duress, as was added, then it would be all right to take his life to save the rest. And even more people signed on to that idea. But that raises a third philosophical question. What is the moral work that consent does? Why does an act of consent make such a moral difference that an act that would be wrong, taking a life without consent, is morally permissible with consent? To investigate those three questions, we're going to have to read some philosophers. And starting next time, we're going to read Bentham and John Stuart Mill, utilitarian philosophers.